Leo Sanchamanyavu Kechamalea to Itaiwai. Hi everyone, happy Monday. We want to start off by offering our sincerest apologies for our absence last week. Unforeseen circumstances prevented us from maintaining our daily schedule, and we're grateful for your patience and continued support. This week, we catch up with a powerful roundup of Indigenous news from across the globe. These stories reflect a world in motion, communities fighting for justice, reclaiming their histories, protecting their lands, and revitalizing their futures. First, the Vatican returns sacred artifacts to Canada. In a remarkable step toward reconciliation, the Vatican returned 62 Indigenous artifacts to communities in Canada. These included items like masks, wampum belts, and ceremonial objects that were collected by Catholic missionaries a century ago and displayed in a 1925 exhibition in Rome. For years, Indigenous leaders questioned the consent around these so called gifts, and the return follows the Vatican's 2023 repudiation of the doctrine of discovery, a series of colonial edicts used to justify the subjugation of indigenous lands and peoples. Pope Leo XIV's symbolic gesture now carries tangible meaning, a commitment to repatriation and healing. Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers will work with museums to ensure the artifacts are respectfully returned to their rightful communities. Next, a data sovereignty milestone. A major advancement in Indigenous rights was achieved with the approval of the first global standard for Indigenous data provenance by the IEEE, spearheaded by University of Arizona professor Stephanie Russo Carroll. This standard codifies how data about Indigenous peoples should be documented, ensuring transparency, consent, and community control. By requiring acknowledgement of data sources and Indigenous affiliations, the standard helps protect traditional knowledge and ensures Indigenous communities maintain authority over how information about them is collected and used. This shift represents a broader global movement for Indigenous data governance and digital self-determination. We next have climate justice at COP30, protests in Brazil. At the COP30 Climate Summit in Belém, Brazil, Indigenous protesters made their voices heard. Led by the Munduruku people, activists blocked the main entrance, demanding protection for their territories from infrastructure projects like the controversial Ferrogrão Railway, which threatens to cut through sacred lands. Though Brazilian President Lula did not meet directly with the protesters, his administration pledged to demarcate key indigenous territories and reevaluate the railway's environmental impact. This protest wasn't an isolated event, it was part of a rising global movement where indigenous voices are claiming central space in climate dialogue. Now we have salmon return to the Klamath River in a victory for tribal nations and environmental restoration. Salmon have returned to Oregon's Klamath River after the removal of outdated dams. For the first time in over a century, Chinook salmon are reaching their ancestral spawning grounds thanks to the largest dam removal project in U.S. history. The Yurok, Karuk, and Klamath tribes led this decades-long effort, combining legal action, protests, and ecological science. Their perseverance restored not just a river, but a cultural lifeline. The return of salmon symbolizes healing, renewal, and strength of Indigenous-led environmental stewardship. Now we have health and representation challenges in North America. Canada lost its measles-free status after a year-long outbreak with disproportionate risks faced by remote Indigenous communities lacking equitable healthcare access. In the U.S., Kansas tribes raised concerns after being excluded from a statewide water task force despite having legal and spiritual claims to water resources. Tribal leaders continue to fight for inclusion and recognition of their sovereign rights in environmental governance. Celebrating culture, Alaska's Far North Fashion Show. Anchorage hosted the Far North Fashion Show featuring Indigenous designers from Alaska, themed the Water Collection. The show celebrated connections to water through stunning garments that fused tradition and modernity. Designers like Jackie Catalina uh, Schaefer and Myrna Lomack Wharton highlighted how Indigenous fashion can be a powerful expression of identity and resilience. Colombia resisting child recruitment. In Colombia, indigenous communities like the Nasa are pushing back against the recruitment of children by armed groups. Unarmed indigenous guards, including mothers and elders, are rescuing their youth and revitalizing traditional security systems. These courageous acts are not only protecting lives, but preserving cultural and familial bonds amid conflict. Australia Indigenous School in Crisis. Uh, Yipirinya School in Alice Springs, a unique institution offering bilingual education in 4 Aboriginal languages, is facing funding and staffing crises. After leadership misconduct and enrollment drops, the school risks closure. Community leaders are calling for immediate support to preserve this cultural and educational sanctuary. Panama, New Zealand, and Ecuador. Global Voices. Panama's Ngabe Bugle midwives are combining ancestral plant medicine with modern maternal care to reduce mortality and preserve cultural practices. In New Zealand, Mount Taranaki was granted legal personhood, echoing Maori beliefs and expanding the rights of nature movement. And in Ecuador, the Quichua women of Yuturi Warmi have formed an all-female ranger unit to defend their forests from illegal mining, showcasing the power of matriarchal leadership and conservation. We thank you for listening and watching Itom Hiawe Reports. From repatriation and legal reforms to education, fashion, and protest, last week reflected the determination and brilliance of Indigenous communities around the world. We thank you for catching up with us and invite you to continue this journey of witness and solidarity. Tuay lios ang chimioke tesiabu, lios apuen chimak, chukula. Until next time, stay connected, stay informed, and honor the voices of the land. We'll see you next time.